joining us. I'm Brenda Nations. I'm the Sustainability Coordinator for the City of Iowa City, and I'm one of the coordinators for the Monarch Festival that we have been having every year, and this will be our third year of that, and which will be held on Sunday from 1 to 3 at Terry Trueblood. So if you're interested in coming to that, I think we're going to have a really crowded event, and we have some additional parking. So this year, the committee decided that we thought it would be a great idea to have an expert come and talk to us. And so, so graciously, Nathan has accepted, and he's going to give a presentation tonight about Monarchs and More. So I'd like to introduce Nathan Brockman. He's the curator at the Butterfly Wing at Ryman Gardens. So take it away, Nathan. Thanks.
All right, so my name is Nathan Brockman. I'm the Butterfly Wing Curator at Ryman Gardens. How many people have been to Ryman Gardens and seen my butterflies? Wonderful. So today I'm going to do a talk about monarchs. It's funny, there's a joke at work but Nathan, you don't like monarchs. It is not that I don't like monarchs, it's just everyone always only wants to talk about monarchs, and I've got 119 other species of butterflies I also like to talk about, plus all the tropical ones. And just to prove that I do like monarchs, always sitting on my desk is this picture of this very young entomologist, Nathan, releasing a monarch butterfly that he raised in his house. So there's me. I'm probably, I don't know, 8, maybe I'm older, I don't know. I never seemed to age at that time. So I do like monarchs, but everyone only wants to talk about monarchs. So today you're gonna get monarchs and then more, because as a true entomologist, I love all the insects, and I want you to as well. So monarchs. People tend to really love the insects they know. And one butterfly that people really know is the monarch. As a species, it is recognizable, it's large and beautiful, and during one time of the year, you see a lot of them. And so you remember that. The only other butterfly in Iowa that can really compete with the monarch on those sort of bases is the painted lady. Because the painted lady is used in classroom education, so people learn about it in school. It's fairly bright and colorful, and some years, like last year, they are everywhere. Now, butterfly populations can have fluxes up and down, and some years they can have huge explosions, and last year, painted ladies had a huge population explosion. So much so that anytime anyone started talking about a butterfly and they started out saying, I've been seeing, I immediately went to, so painted ladies are at your house too, right? Because the next thing they would say was, well, they're kind of small, they're orange and brown, they look like small monarchs. No, they don't. Monarchs are completely different. So, painted ladies, monarchs. So let's talk about monarchs. Monarchs are kind of fun. You can identify which are the males and which are the females. Yep, one of each up there. And it's really easy, too, when you know what to look for. So your males have 2 spots right here on the hind wing. Those are pheromone glands that they use as part of their reproductive dance with the females. You'll also see on the female, the veins have a much darker border on them. And if you had the 2 side by side, the female is going to be slightly larger than the male. Across the butterfly world as a whole, that's usually how it works, because they're carrying the egg load. Females tend to be bigger than the males across the board. So, easy way to tell them apart, right here on the hind wings, males will have those dots, females will not. So, easy to identify them. Why is this butterfly easy to identify as a whole? Because it's orange and black. And it's got these bold vein patterns. Now, they're not always orange and black. As it turns out, there is a white morpho. Yes, there is a white morpho. It flies in my butterfly wing. There is a white monarch. And it is possible to find white monarchs here in Iowa. It's a genetic thing. It's not common though. But if you happen to spend time in Hawaii, about 10% of the Hawaiian population of monarchs are white. So it is possible to find white monarchs. Now, there are some other butterflies who like to look like monarchs or just look like monarchs. Maybe they don't like to look like monarchs. Maybe they want to be their own special selves and not be in the shadow of the monarch. But I hate to say it to all of them, they're all in the shadow of the monarch. The monarch is, again, that big, super charismatic species that everyone knows. So one species that is trying to copy a bit is our viceroy. Now, monarchs are distasteful butterflies. I don't like to use the word poison because anytime someone says poison, oftentimes they've thought of skulls and crossbones and things dying. If an animal were to eat a monarch, it is not immediately going to drop dead on the ground. It actually probably will not drop dead on the ground. And if you just type up on your Google, blue jay vomiting monarch, you'll get some really great photos of what happens when you eat a monarch. It tastes bad, it makes your tummy hurt, and you go, "Bleh." And so that's why I like to use monarchs are distasteful individuals. Now, there is some debate whether or not the viceroy is technically distasteful or not, but it is mimicking, we believe, the color of the monarchs, because we do know the monarchs are distasteful to predators, and anybody that eats them is going to have a reaction to them. They want to take advantage of that chemical defense and mimic the monarch so they get that defense as well. The way to tell monarchs apart from viceroys is right here. See this dark line cutting across those veins? That does not happen in the monarchs. And I know that's a white one, but 2 clicks back to go to the other one. Another butterfly that looks a lot like the monarch is the queen. The reason the queen looks a lot like the monarch is they're cousins, essentially. They're both butterflies in the genus Danaus. Monarchs are not the only Danaus. Danaus plexippus is our monarchs. This is the queen. Queens maybe could make it to Iowa. Not really well. They're really more of a southern butterfly. You can find a lot of them down in Florida, Georgia, in the southern part of the state. I believe if you look in the Butterflies of Iowa book, though, at the very, very back of the rare sightings found in Iowa sort of area, there is a picture of the queen. So if they get caught in a windstorm and blown up here, it could happen. They feed on milkweed. They're distasteful to predators. Funny story, viceroys that are found here in Iowa have a light orange color to them, so they look like the monarch. This picture of this viceroy here is actually a viceroy from Florida. Its color matches much more the queen's color, so depending on where you find your viceroy, they have different colors of orange, because in Florida they really would rather prefer to copy the queen than the monarch in color. So they have 2 different color patterns. So let's talk about our monarchs. Monarchs like milkweed. Milkweed is their host plant. As caterpillars, they can really only feed on milkweed and a couple of plants that, through systematics of where they belong, relatedness of plants, have been moved out of that group. So they'll feed on milkweeds and really close relatives that might still be milkweeds. We have 18 species of milkweed found in the state. Some are more common than others. One of the more common ones, it says it right in its name, is common milkweed. That's typically the one people talk about when they talk about monarchs, but a lot of other species of milkweeds do a lot of good work for monarchs. And if you are gardening and want to plant milkweed in your yard for the butterflies, you will probably be a lot happier if you do not plant common milkweed. See, there's a reason this plant has weed in its name. There's a reason for years farmers wanted to get it out of their fields. Because it's a weed. It grows amazingly well. Everywhere. And the problem is when you plant common milkweed, and this one's common milkweed right here, it doesn't always come back in that same spot next year. It'll come up in the middle of your yard. But I put you in the flower bed on the edge. Why do you want to be where I want to mow? I've actually seen people mow around the milkweed in their yards. And the next year, they have 5 patches they're mowing around. So there's lots of different milkweeds. They come in different colors. I actually brought 3 different species of milkweed with me today. One of which is tropical milkweed. Now, tropical milkweed is an interesting milkweed. It's much more of a southern milkweed. You can grow it really easy from seed. It grows really fast. It does not survive our winters, so you have to replant it every year. But there's a bit of controversy right now with tropical milkweed. There's a little worry with tropical milkweed, and if you plant it here in Iowa and the monarchs feed on it as caterpillars, that they're going to think in their heads, I'm already down south where it's nice and warm and it's going to stay warm. I don't need to migrate, which is wrong, right? Our Iowa winters would take care of any monarch that stuck around. So really right now the big push is to get people to plant common milkweeds, not common milkweed. Common milkweed's fine, but native milkweed species. It is okay to plant this. You will get caterpillars. We believe they will still migrate, maybe. We just don't know for sure. So there's a little bit of controversy with tropical milkweed. Who'd have thought there'd be controversy with butterflies? All right, so here is our eggs. They're cute little things. This one's blown up a lot. They're much smaller, trust me. People that like to raise monarchs in their houses oftentimes get really good at finding these small eggs on plants. They're so hard to find, though. Typically, they don't find them as eggs. They find small caterpillars, and so they're bringing small caterpillars always in. If the monarch has its choice, it will only lay 1 egg per plant. It will lay that egg on the tender new growth at that time, and sometimes they're laying that egg on a tiny little bitty plant just coming out of the ground. This year was a really interesting year with monarchs, and because of the way weather was, we were seeing monarchs before we were seeing milkweed. And so anything those early monarchs were laying on was just barely breaking the surface. But they did. And I have another fun story to add to this year's monarchs later. So, those are the eggs. Caterpillar chews its way out. So unlike chicken eggs, where chickens can peck, peck, peck and break their way out, caterpillars have to eat their way out of their eggs. And actually, they will typically eat their entire egg because there's a lot of nutrients in that egg itself. So the egg is oftentimes, for most butterflies, the first meal they eat. Then we have our caterpillar stage. And I did bring caterpillars that people can come up and play with and pet later at the end of the show. These guys are basically eating machines. They eat and eat until their bodies are just so full, at which time they will molt, shed their skin, and start eating again. So as insects, they have an exoskeleton. They don't have an internal skeleton like us. So in order to grow inside, they have to molt or shed their skin. And in between each of those molts, we call that an instar. And I'll show you some pictures of a different species of butterfly later in the 5 instars it has. Very characteristic colors. Yeah, I'm really in the right town for this. So, lots of black and gold. Lots of black and gold. I had to borrow this backpack so that I could come with something bright Iowa State with me. Because when any of you come visit me, you know you put your Iowa clothes on to come walking on Iowa State's campus. You know you do. So very characteristic colors. That black, that white, that yellow is warning things. I'm distasteful. You don't want to eat me. As it turns out, lots of things still eat them. Predation is a big reason that a lot of them don't make it to adulthood. Happens in all species. As they are eating their milkweed, the milkweed tends to sap. So I broke this plant here. We get a bit of that white sap. If they're a smaller butterfly or a smaller caterpillar going on to, say, a big common milkweed plant, that sappy milk substance can actually glue their mouths shut, killing them. So they came up with a really cool trick to get around that. Not only does their body use the compounds in there, and it's a carcinogenic compound that they're storing into their body, they're also smart enough to know that if they chew on the plant down here on the end and just make a little snip, that the sap will start flowing here, reducing the sap pressure out here on the leaf, allowing them to eat it without getting their mouth all full of the white sap, gluing it shut. So a neat little trick they use to get around that. After they've eaten all they're going to eat, they form their chrysalis. Now some of you are like, wait, you put that upside down. No, I didn't. I put it the right side up because the head's up here, and the bottom of its abdomen's down here. They just hang themselves upside down when they hang from a plant. So this is a chrysalis. I'm going to talk about what the difference is between a chrysalis and a cocoon in just a second. But this is a monarch chrysalis. They should always be green like this. They will have the yellow, shiny gold spots on them always, which are great at reflecting light, can kind of scare things and shoo them away a bit. And they will hang themselves upside down. Now the reason they hang themselves upside down is because when they go to emerge out of their chrysalis, they're going to push the chrysalis open along kind of defined lines. They're going to drop themselves down out of their chrysalis, hopefully hanging onto their chrysalis, because gravity helps with this next process. They're going to take fluid left over in their body from their caterpillar stage, and they're going to pump it down into their wings. That will help the wings expand out. So when they first come out, their wings are like this. They're tiny. They pump the fluid down into the wings out, so it's kind of like blowing up a balloon. The fluids, the wing will then start drying. They will draw the fluids back into their body, leaving empty veins with just a little bit of fluid in them that then dries and hardens, and that's what really forms the structural part of the butterfly's wings, is empty tubes with dried fluids left inside. They will then expel that fluid before their first flight, lightening their body load, and then away they go. And we call that fluid meconium. And if you've ever seen my emergence chambers before we clean them, the butterflies make a mess with it. And it comes in all sorts of fun colors too, like red and purples and oranges and browns and yellows. Each species has their own color of meconium. So another fun thing about monarchs is when they go to form their chrysalis, they will not or should not form it on the milkweed plant. They will take a migratory little walk. When we first opened the butterfly wing, the whole outer ring, the planting bed around the butterfly wing, was all milkweed plants. We had tons of monarchs feeding on it. And then, as we got later in the season, we had monarch chrysalids lining the entire length of the hallway, because they want to leave the plant they're on and go to a much more solid surface. If they stay on this plant, and there happens to be another monarch caterpillar eating on there, and it eats the leaf they're on, that chrysalis is going to end up on the ground. And when they go to open it up and spread their wings, they're going to be on the ground, which is a really hard time for them to spread their wings. They have a very short window to crawl to something, crawl up onto it, get themselves turn the right direction, and spread their wings. Oftentimes, if their pupa's on the ground, they will not emerge properly, and then as an adult, they will never fly, which means somebody will eat them, so they're helping out the environment in that way. All right, so chrysalis. So chrysalis, cocoon. Butterflies make a chrysalis. Moths may make a cocoon. And it's going to get even murkier later. So a cocoon is just an outer silken coating wrapped around a pupa. A butterfly chrysalis can also be called a pupa. So the safe word here is pupa. You won't be wrong. Not all moths make a cocoon. Some moths have what we call just a naked pupa. One of those is the sphinx moth. The sphinx moth has a naked pupa, and they actually burrow themselves after they form their pupa. The pupa rotates, gyrates in a very specific pattern to drive itself into the ground. So it spends the winter underground. And then in the fall, it gyrates in the opposite direction, driving it to the surface, where it then can emerge out of its pupa and then fly off. So, moths, cocoon, butterflies, chrysalids. But I'm going to tell you right now that when you're talking about insects, you should never use the word always or never, because you will always be wrong. All right? Just keep that in mind. Moths and butterflies. So there are lots of things people use to tell the difference between moths and butterflies. They're pretty much wrong most of the time. Some of the things people like to use: moths rest with their wings open. Butterflies rest with their wings closed. Well, that one's open. Moths have large bodies. Butterflies have small bodies. Probably the smallest lepidopteran is a microlep moth. Tiny, tiny guys. I don't like working on them because I like my eyesight. They're so tiny. So small and big isn't a great identifier. Antennas can be okay. Moths have big feathery antennas. Butterflies have straight antennas with little knobs at the end. Doesn't work great all the times either. The sunset moth, which is an African species of moth, is probably the most spectacular of all lepidopterans, better than any butterfly you'll find even, and their antennas look just like a butterfly's antennas. So they can be narrow as well. Moths fly at night, butterflies fly during the day. There are plenty of day-flying moths, and there are some night or dusk and dawn flying butterflies. So another not great one. But my personal favorite way to tell the two apart is butterflies are pretty and moths, well, they're not. And even our Iowa Luna moth is a spectacular individual. So that doesn't hold either. End of the day, moths and butterflies, they're pretty closely related. Yes, there's some things you can use to tell them apart, but again, the big things people like to use, like the wings open, the wings close, those don't hold when you really start looking at lots of different individuals. So we've got our monarch butterfly adults. Spectacular individuals. You can see them flying around doing lots of stuff. Yes, question?
Is there one thing that distinguishes them, the moth from the butterfly? Did I miss that?
No. Not one thing that I can give you that you can just look at it from a distance and say, it's this because of that. No.
So why is there a separate category? Why is there
You know, we scientists, we like to put things in boxes, a box over here and a box over there, and then another person comes along later and they put it in a different box after that. At one point in time, monarch butterflies used to be Nymphalidae. So they used to be lumped with a whole bunch of other butterflies. Somebody came along and said, no, they can't be Nymphalidae. They had to be Danaidae. And they put monarchs in their own box. Well, all the Danaeus are in that box now. So we like to split and lump, and you're a splitter or you're a lumper. You put things together, you separate them apart. They're all Lepidoptera. Now, there's tricks you can use with some of the other life stages to decide that they're this or that. But when you're looking at the adults, it can get really murky sometimes, just looking at the adult life stage. Does that answer your question? Well enough that you're like, I don't get it still. Good, good. I'm going to show you how murky it gets, okay? We'll talk more about it. So Here's our monarch. Again, spectacular individuals. So the thing everyone really wants to talk about with monarchs is their migration. Now, I just want to point out right now that there are other species of butterflies that migrate. That painted lady that we looked at early on, it also migrates. The red admiral we're going to talk about later also migrates. But who gets all the press? The monarch does. Remember, I still like them. I just like to give them a hard time. Okay, so what do I got? I got spring and fall in this one. I got a new picture. This is from Xerces Society. They have a really fun new picture. In the fall, because that's where we're at right now, sometime next month. And you know what? I can't tell you when it'll be next month. Sometime next month, though, migration is going to start for the monarchs. The reason I can't tell you when it's going to happen is because it's all really temperature dependent, weather dependent. Lots of factors play into it. Monarchs will start leaving Canada because it gets cold in Canada a lot faster than it gets cold here, and we're happy for that. And they will leave there, and they will start working their way down. And the way the migration works is kind of like a snowball rolling down a hill. You got a small number up there working their way down, and as they come down, your numbers build up bigger and bigger until you have a lot of them. And actually, when they get here in the state, we can have quite a few of them, to the point where they have this fun behavior at night called communal roosting, where they will gather together in large masses in trees, and if you're lucky enough, you can find them in big numbers, hundreds of them, in a tree here in Iowa. Has anyone in their lifetime seen that here in Iowa? So there's some hands there. Now, here's the next question. You saw it once. Were you able to go back to that same spot the next year and see it again? Yep, nobody. So, some people are lucky enough to have that happen to them year after year after year. Other people, they get one occasion. And it's not that there's a special road they take and stop, but there kind of is. They'll fly from their areas. They'll find identifiable spaces that are safe for them to roost in. And if that spot is there year after year, they'll keep going there. But for them to go to that spot, they had to go to the spot before. And if a mini mall got put in that spot before, the path changes and they go a different direction. So some people have lucked out and have had them year after year, and then all of a sudden one year they stopped and never came back again. It's happening somewhere. Someone's getting to see it, but the whole path changed. So progress starts up north. That individual, so an individual that is right now a caterpillar, one of these here, will form their pupa. They will emerge out of their pupa, and that individual will fly all the way down to Mexico. Boop. One individual will take that flight all the way down. Now, they cheat a little bit. They actually use the jet stream to help them fly down. So they fly way up into the jet stream, and then they can ride that wind curtain. There's actually a really amazing NPR, they turned it into a video. It was originally just an NPR audio recording story, but they turned it into a video with cartoons, and it's called the Insect Superhighway. So if you just NPR Insect Superhighway, you can watch it. It's amazing. And it talks about all the insects that are constantly moving over our heads in the jet stream. So the monarchs get themselves up into the jet stream, they ride that down. No, they don't get there overnight. Same individual gets all the way down. Now, everything, for the most part, east of the Rocky Mountains goes this way, for the most part. Everything west of the Rocky Mountains goes down here into Southern California, for the most part. Some individuals that have been tagged over here now have been found down in this area here, which wasn't believed to be a thing earlier. So that's where tagging monarchs has given us some fun stuff. Some monarchs find themselves down here into Florida. Now, monarchs are talked a lot about being endangered. The monarch butterfly is doing okay. The migratory behavior of monarch butterflies is what is really threatened. So the ones that come up and visit us, because there is a monarch population that lives down here in the southern states, especially down here in Florida, that never goes anywhere. Their population is believed to be doing okay. But what the big concern is the ones that come up to us and us seeing them in the future and them actually losing the migratory behavior. All right, so there are actually fun ways that you can get involved with helping scientists, anyone, learn about monarchs and their migrations. This is a website called Journeys North, which is silly because I'm going to talk to you about their journey south. So the website's Journey North. You can go onto Journeys North when you see large clusters of monarchs migrating south. And you can post, and when you post, a little dot will be put. And if I look right now, it doesn't look like there's any in Iowa City. There's definitely one of names, though. I'm sure there's one of names. I know. Now, just to be fair, I grew up in Fort Madison, which is definitely in Hawkeye country, and my mother is an Iowa alum. But somehow both her children went to Iowa State. And you can see here this year, and this isn't last year, this is just an earlier year I had, they were migrating through here the first part of September to the middle of September. They were migrating through Iowa. So you can go online when you see a bunch of monarchs, post a date on here, a dot will be put on, and you can actually go to their website and watch year after year and see the changes in the time and actually watch and follow their progress south, which is really a lot of fun. So you can see it takes them a long time to leave here and get all the way down here. We're all the way into the end of October before they really start getting their way into their resting spots in Mexico. So one individual, though, left Canada, left Iowa, wherever the story starts, and goes all the way down to Mexico. Now, when they get to Mexico, really they get kind of lazy, and they just hang around. Now, I use this picture because this really tells a fun story. Now, one, my grandmother loved butterflies. Not in the research and study of them. She just thought they were amazing and beautiful, so everything she owned had butterflies on it. All of her decorations, clothing, everything. So when she passed, I got pretty much all of it as the entomologist who worked with butterflies, including a copy of this National Geographic magazine, which this came out after they found where the monarchs went. And it's hard to read from back there, I'm guessing, but if you look, this is an August of 1976 issue. Up until about a little over 40 years ago, we didn't know where the monarchs went. My other grandmother was an elementary school teacher. And from her, I got a book from the 1950s talking all about the monarchs, their life cycle, what they fed on, and that in the winter, they went south. But the story ended because they didn't know what happened to them when they went south. So a little over 40 years ago, we finally figured out that in the mountains down in Mexico, there were huge populations of them. And it really truly is like this, where there are so many monarchs that the branches on the trees get weighed down. Monarchs don't weigh anything alone, but you put hundreds to thousands of them on a branch, and that branch will bend. The trees go from being green to orange. And if you take an aerial shot, you actually see what looks like an orange spot in the tree canopy. So it's spectacular. It's hard to count butterflies that way. But they do. And this is where all of the information we know about populations comes from, is from the counts down in Mexico. Now, the way they do it, the way they do it is they actually count how many hectares the butterflies are occupying in Mexico. Now, to make this authentic, this graph is actually in Spanish. I actually took this from the World Wildlife Federation, or World Wildlife Fund, Mexico, the original sources site. So you can see everyone's talking about the decline we've had in monarchs. So here's high numbers, still high numbers. Here's where we dropped down and we were really getting worried was right in here. We really got low right there. That's the lowest recorded history. And then we had a good year. And here's where we're at last winter. Butterfly populations fluctuate up and down regularly. That we don't worry about. When you fluctuate to where you're down here, we start to worry because when your genetics gets that low, you can have problems. Now, that's still a really big number, but we don't want to be that low. We want to be a lot higher. We would love to be somewhere up here would be great. And maybe one day we'll get back there again. And even there's a sad story with this number right here. You know, this looks hopeful, right? After that count was taken that year, there was a really weird, hard, late freeze. And it was a wet freeze. It's okay if it's cold, but it was a wet cold, and it killed a lot of the monarchs before they got a chance to leave. So even though this number was a nice big one here, not that many left when they left that year because a lot of them got caught in that wet freeze and they died. But we're right here right now. That's a lot better than here, and we only hope that numbers go up. So what are problems for monarchs? And with this, it's really what are problems for any butterfly? Habitat loss. Habitat loss is one of the biggest problems for any insect, for a lot of animals, really. One of my peers in Illinois likes to make fun of the fact that Illinois has more native habitat than Iowa. It's really sad. But he's right. They technically have more native remnant prairie than we do here in Iowa. Predators. Lots of things eat monarchs. They eat other insects. It's a big thing. Parasitoids, those parasitic wasps that will actually lay their eggs in the caterpillar. Caterpillar will go about its day, continue eating, form a chrysalis, and instead of a butterfly out of it, you get lots of little wasp. That's a problem. It's very much like Alien, you know, when they erupt out of the stomach. That's very much what it's like when you see like 50 little bitty parasitic wasps crawling out quickly. And it's even worse than that because once one chews a hole in the chrysalis, they all rush out of that same hole. They don't make their own exit holes. So it is very much like the Alien movie. Disease is a problem, and I'm going to talk more about that later. Pesticide use, whether it's a herbicide, which is then maybe affecting the milkweed plant, an insecticide, which you may be using it for one insect, but it affects all insects, always a concern. Migration losses. Monarchs need to invest in Garmin. They are not great at direction. They're okay. Lots of them make it to Mexico every year, but a lot of them get lost. There are reports of giant cargo ships out in the ocean who get swarmed with monarchs going the wrong direction. It happens regularly each year. The monarchs got into a jet stream that pushed them the wrong way, they started flying the wrong direction, whatever, and giant numbers of them found on cargo ships who then the next day fly off into the ocean, probably never to be seen again. A lot of them still make it. Also, migration losses, cars. We hit a lot of them when we're driving. One of the big corridors that they're really working really hard to plant right now is, which is 80? 80 goes north-south? No, 80 goes east-west. Who goes north-south? 35. The 35 corridor is one that they're looking to plant all the way up with milkweed because that's kind of the path the monarchs take down. We run a lot of cars up and down 35. And with that, they're getting whacked every once in a while. So there's a lot of losses with migration. Overwintering habitat losses is one of the really big concerning ones. Illegal logging. They're actually cutting out the forest where these butterflies go. And if those forests are gone, those trees they need to sit on are gone, what are they going to do? How are they going to survive? Those trees protect them. They need those trees. If they go to a different area, they'll probably freeze. Or, even worse, they won't be cold enough. They'll want to fly around because they're too warm. There won't be enough nectar for them, and they'll starve. They have a very sweet spot where they need to spend their time. And then weather events. We have an early frost. They didn't make it out of Canada. They're frozen before they leave. We have a really late freeze down in, or it'd be an early freeze, I guess, down in Mexico like we did a couple of years ago. That weather affects them. They start migrating, get caught in a tornado, and get blown off track. So weather effects can really cause them a bunch of problems as well. And we did one year recently, had a hurricane during migration, I believe, which they were all worried about how many would get affected by that. Okay, so our butterfly left Iowa, left Canada, we don't care in the fall, flew all the way down to Mexico, hung out in Mexico, sipping on a drink with a little umbrella in it like they do down there. Springtime came around, which is much earlier than our springtime here, and those butterflies will leave Mexico, fly into the southern states, Texas, Louisiana, Georgia. They will mate, lay their eggs, and die. Their offspring will go through their caterpillar, their egg, their caterpillar, their pupal stage in those southern states. They will emerge out. They will fly up to us, where they will mate, lay their eggs, and die. And then we can have 2 to 3 generations, depending on how our weather is here, that will live their entire lifespan here in Iowa. As adults, those individuals only live about 2 weeks. So it is only the fall generation that lives a long time, and it is the great-great-grandchildren of the individuals that flew down the year before that will be the ones that will make the trip the next year. So it's a really fascinating process. But remember, they're not the only butterflies that migrate. They just get all the coverage. And in the springtime, you can go to Journeys North again and record the first monarch you see. And we really don't know much about, we actually know a lot less about the migration north than the migration south. So the more information we can get, the better it is. Because it's really hard to tag butterflies going the other way. It's easy to tag them going south. We just don't find a lot of the tags. So at Ryman Gardens, we run a statewide program called the Iowa Butterfly Survey Network. We train citizen scientists to go out into the field and survey butterfly populations. Not just monarchs, all of the butterflies in Iowa. And I checked before I came, and we currently only have 1 participant in Johnson County. I'm just saying. We get trainings every year. We did one in Fairfield and Cedar Rapids last year. Maybe next year we'll come to Iowa City and do one. Maybe. So we have a program. We have people all over the state surveying butterfly populations, and we saw something really fun this year. Monarchs in Iowa are having one of their best years we have seen in a really long time. Now, I don't know what this means, though. So here's previous year's monarch sites, and this is up to July 21st is when we pulled this. So these are all July 21st dates for those years. Yes, our program has grown and we have more people out surveying, but you'll see just how much bigger this year's number is to any previous year's number up till July 21st. Because typically when monarchs come into Iowa, lay their eggs, have their offspring, that early spring one we have, they leave. And during the summer, we don't see a lot of monarchs. They typically head north, and the number counts during the summer are usually very low just because there's not a lot that hung around. They went north. For whatever reason this year, they stayed. Now, it's not just Iowa, because my cohort who likes to make fun of me in Illinois, I talked to him because he runs the Illinois Butterfly Monitoring Network. And he said, Nathan, our numbers are up really high. I talked to my friend in Ohio who runs a similar program, and he goes, our numbers are really high. And at that same conference, the three of us were sitting at the table, there was a Canadian there. And I go, how are your numbers? We're not seeing many monarchs. So the monarchs made it into Iowa, they made it into the Midwest, but they don't seem to have moved up as much. Maybe. The Canada one was very anecdotal. She doesn't have a program. She just hadn't seen a lot. So it'll really be fun this year when they go south to see if the numbers go way up because we had a really good year here. We know that when the Midwest has a good year for monarchs, the populations in Mexico are typically good years. We are having the best year we have had in a really long time. So either it's going to be a quark, and it'll just be what it is down there, or the numbers down there are going to be really big, bigger than 3 years ago when we hit that 4.1 hectares. We don't know yet. So it'll be really fun to see what the counts come in this winter when they put out the official counts. Another project that we are helped with, the Monarch Consortium, is a group of industry, researchers, academics, enthusiasts. There's a bit of that in there. But they have a lot of research that's happening. And there was a research project that happened across the state where they were actually testing different milkweed plants to see what they like to lay their eggs on the most, what they fed on the most, what attracted them the most, and a variety of other factors. And we had one of those plots at Ryman Gardens. And there's a picture of a bit of that plot right there. It even includes a plant that confuses the monarchs. This is the honey vine. Believed to be a plant that they get confused by, will lay their eggs on, and then the caterpillars don't feed on, and they actually die because it's not actually a milkweed. And so Tori, the grad student who did this work, has recently graduated, and a lot of her stuff is being published now, and some has been already published. But one of the fun things that Tori found was, in a cage situation, if they put one milkweed plant, they got X number of eggs. But if they took that same milkweed plant and added more milkweed plants, so what this showed was more diversity of milkweed in a garden actually produced from the butterflies 2.5 times more eggs. So when you're planting your garden and looking at what you want to put in there, consider not only putting one species of milkweed, but 2 or 3 or 4, if you can find them, in your garden, because it will generate you more eggs from your monarchs. Another thing we're doing at Ryman, we're partnering with a group out of Cedar Rapids. They call themselves the Monarch Research Station. They've been making these monarch zones, which are basically protected little huts. It has lots of milkweed in it, and you have caterpillars. And so you put a bunch of caterpillars in there, and we produced over 200 caterpillars in our little zone this year. And we use it as a study we were doing as well. We actually tagged all those monarchs and released them at Ryman Gardens, and then tracked how many we continued to see, which was 0. Because monarchs are ornery and they like to fly away. They really do. So with our surveys we do on the grounds, we saw very few after 2 days after release of the marked monarchs remaining in the garden grounds. It was really amazing to see that many just disappear. We'd see a monarch, we'd get excited, we'd go over to it, and it would be a monarch from somewhere else without the mark. So it was really fun. Last year we did this, we really pushed it to see just how many we could raise in here. We raised just shy of 500 monarchs in that tent over the season. So it was a lot of fun. But with stuff like this, because this is becoming very popular, people wanting to raise monarchs in captivity, release them on their porch, in their classroom, there are things you have to worry about. The health of the individual that you're putting out is an important thing. And there's a thing called OE. There's the name right there, if you want to try and pronounce it. OE is so much easier. OE, which is a protozoan parasite which gets transferred from the adult to the caterpillar who eats it. it develops back on the adult again, and the cycle continues. If a butterfly has OE, it can actually reduce its fitness, reduce its ability to produce offspring, and eventually crash a population. And we didn't know about OE until fairly recently, within the last decade, I would say is the amount. But here is what a healthy monarch butterfly's scales look like. Here is an unhealthy one with OE, and I don't know how well you can see it from back there. See these dark dots right here on this scale? That's the OE. And so I'm looking at monarch butterflies under that microscope there, checking to see how many had OE. Luckily, the left side of this sheet here were the good ones. The right side of the sheet had OE. There were a lot more good ones. A lot. We did find some individuals with OE, though, and those individuals did not get to go outside.
And what did you do to them?
They did not get to go outside. We froze them. They were all frozen. So,
Wait, but wouldn't freezing it perpetuate the disease?
freezing it killed all of it. And then it was all put in a bag, sent to Vet Med where they have an incinerator, and they burned it. Nothing went outside. All of my lab waste, because I am a USDA containment facility, has to be incinerated because I have tropical organisms that I'm bringing in from other countries, and there's potential of tropical parasites, tropical diseases, so everything in my lab gets treated that way. Frozen, then incinerated. All right, so we've been talking about our monarchs. But wait, other people have monarchs as well. Our monarchs are the cool ones though, right? So there is actually a South American monarch. It is now its own species. Back to splitters and lumpers. It used to just be called a subspecies of our monarch. Now it has been given its own speciesness. They believe that the two parted ways about 2 million years ago. They look very similar, but if you put our monarch with their monarch, you do see some differences, especially along the hind wing. There are also monarchs, well, we've talked about Hawaii, so our monarchs still, I suppose. There are also monarchs over here. Those are our monarchs. The Australians, they call the monarch the wanderer. They also call it the monarch sometimes, but really they call it the wanderer. The reason there are our monarchs over here is because when shipping started moving ships from here over to here for trade, the monarchs that were feeding on milkweeds in the shipyards would crawl up onto the ships to form their pupa. The ships would then sail across the ocean, and when they were in port over here in one of those areas, they would emerge out and fly around. And there just happens to be plants there they can feed on, so they established. Monarchs have also been found up here, but there's no milkweed. So remember those lost monarchs I talked about that got blown in the jet stream? They found their way up here. Adults were found, but they can't establish because there's no milkweed up there. So monarchs aren't only found in the United States. They're found in other places as well. And I always get a kick out of that our monarchs are over here. Oh, and all those monarchs in those other countries make migratory flights as well. Sometimes backwards from ours, because their climates are different, but they make migratory flights as well. All right, I hope you got your monarch fixed in because I'm done. Done. Now the and more part. So, did you know that Iowa is only one of 2 states that does not have an official state insect or butterfly? I mean, we got a rock, we got a bird, a tree, a song, a motto. Iowa actually has less official state symbols than any other state.
What's wrong with us?
Here's the funny part. It's not that people haven't tried. It's that the legislatures, both the House and the Senate, really never passed them. The last one to be adopted was the state rock, our geode. That was the last one, and it was like in 1950. If I had my way, our official state butterfly would be the regal fritillary. Oh wait, I tried. 6 times. So a bill was introduced 3 separate times. Bills last for 2 years before they die. The regal fritillary has been put up for state butterfly 3 times. 6 times in front of House and Senate, and all 6 times it never made it out of committee. It couldn't even make it out of committee. Too much controversy for us to have a state butterfly. Why would regal fritillary be my choice for state butterfly? Well, it's an amazing butterfly. First, it's a big, beautiful butterfly. It's bigger than the monarch. Just saying. It is found in tall grass prairies. So it needs a habitat that Iowa used to be covered with. Really speaks to Iowa right there, right? In the fall, the female regal fritillaries have to lay their eggs in tall grass prairie on a plant that isn't even there. So their host plant is bird's foot violet and prairie violet. That plant senesces during the summer, dies back to the ground. So that means that regal fritillary has to fly along. She has to pick up on chemical volatiles from a dead plant on the ground, dive bomb into the tall grass prairie, crawl to the ground, laying her eggs on the ground where there's no plant. Then crawl her way back out, fly off, and do that again and again. Now, not only is it the regal fritillary females that are amazing, we also have the caterpillars. So, in late fall, early winter, that caterpillar is going to hatch out of its egg. It's going to eat its egg. That's it. It's going to eat its egg and nothing else the entire winter. Eat your dinner and go to bed all winter. So it gets one meal. It survives an Iowa winter down in the leaf litter, covered with Iowa snow, as a first instar caterpillar. So it's the tiniest little kid stage. It survives an Iowa winter. That's a tough butterfly. I mean, monarchs go to Mexico where it's warm and they sip those drinks with the umbrellas, right? Overwinters as a tiny little first instar caterpillar. In the springtime, bird's foot violet finally grows up. They start eating again. They'll go through their instars. In late spring, early summer, the males and females are up flying around. Males and females mate, and then the males die. And then the females have to survive a hot Iowa summer, waiting until fall when they can finally lay their eggs again. There is only one generation of this butterfly each year. That would be my pick for the official state butterfly of Iowa. But apparently I can't make that happen. Oh, and if you're like, wait a second, why don't we just make it the monarch? The monarch is already 7 states' official state insect or butterfly. My thought is there are enough insects in the world that no state should copy each other at all. And it gets sillier than that. If you think 7 is bad for monarchs, the honeybee is the most official state symbol of any other insects. And the honeybee's not even native to the United States. It was introduced. Don't get me started. I guess it's better we have nothing than the honeybee. I like the honeybee too, don't get me wrong.
So what's the black fly?
Oh, so if we were to have a state insect, I can only make one cell at a time. If we were to have an official state insect, it would be the ebony jewel-winged damselfly. Also a native, it is a mosquito eater. Great, right? It lives in, you find it a lot of times in small waterways with trees, which Iowa has lots of. So it's a great native that would be a great representative for our state as an official state insect. But I'm willing to go with any insect that is native to Iowa and is not already had by another state. So ladybugs are out and lots. All right, so Iowa is home to about 120 species. I say about because nobody can agree on just how many are found in the state, and the number kind of moves a little bit. Unfortunately, of that 120 species, officially, we have 2 endangered, 5 threatened, and 25 species of concerns from a list that was created over 20 years ago. This is really much more of the new list used by the DNR. And this list here is actually a little older, and there's some new ones on there, because the monarch is not currently on this list, right? The monarch is on the newest new list, which I don't have up here. So of the ones that are officially listed, the dark blue ones here are officially currently listed in Iowa as endangered species. Completely extirpated, not found in the state. Probably not very many in the state, if any at all. The blue ones are the ones that are officially currently listed as threatened, and then the light blue ones are the species of concern. The green ones are the new ones. Most of these butterflies up here are prairie obligate species. They need our prairies to survive. Their host plants are in there. That's where you would find them. And as I mentioned before, our amount of native prairie left in the state is lower than what it used to be. There's a lot of work being done right now to bring that up, and hopefully as we get more reestablished prairie habitat, we can see some of these go up. But for some species, the decline has been so amazing, we don't even know what's happening, especially in the skipper group. The grass skippers have just vanished, and it's been fast. In the last 12 years, we've just seen populations from, oh, there's fine, there's lots of them, to I can't find any. So I don't have all day to talk about, or I could talk about every species, but nobody would go home, and I have a long drive. So I just picked a couple. This is the red admiral. Here's its egg, its cute caterpillar, its pupa, and then the adult. This is a fun butterfly. If you're out walking in the evening, especially as we get later in the fall here, and you see something kick off a plant, and it flies at you, and maybe it flies around you, possibly even lands on you, at which time we all go, oh, look how cute the butterfly landed on me. That is a male red admiral. And really what it's telling you is, get out of my territory. They're extremely territorial. They'll chase anything out, birds, whoever, it doesn't matter. And they'll chase them away. Just for a note for later, this butterfly really likes stinging nettle. So if you want red admirals, gotta have those plant. We'll talk about it more later. The buckeye, another one of our fun, really kind of overlooked beautiful butterflies. It's not a big butterfly, it's a small butterfly. But when you blow it up and you get close and you can see all the very detailed patterns, the tans, the oranges, the purples, the browns, and how they all mix together, it's a spectacular, beautiful butterfly. The caterpillar even has like this iridescent purple at the base of its spine. In all of its stages, it's beautiful. But most people don't see them because it's a small butterfly. It gets overlooked a lot. But beautiful, beautiful butterfly. One of our skippers, the silver-spotted skipper. I use the silver-spotted skipper because it's the easiest one to identify. It has a giant silver spot right there. That's its name, silver-spotted skipper. The silver-spotted skipper goes through 5 instars. Now, I talked about instars earlier, how things had to grow, they had to shed their skin. Here you can see the 5 instars. Here's what it looks like when it first comes out of its egg. It molts, it's this big. Notice the head capsules get bigger each time. This big, this big, this big. Now, I also said never say always or never with insects. And who makes cocoons? Who makes cocoons? Moths make cocoons. Skippers are a butterfly, okay? I'm just telling you right now, skippers are a butterfly. And what is a cocoon? Outer silken coating spun around a pupa, right? And I just told you skippers were what? Moths or butterflies? Okay, thank you. So here is an outer silken coating spun around a pupa. We call that a cocoon. So a fun thing this butterfly does, when it's feeding as a caterpillar, they make, for lack of a better term, yurts. They chew the plant in such a way that they can then fold it over. They take little bits of silk they spin and hold it down. When it's time to feed, they come out, eat, and then go back in for the night. Actually, they eat more during the night than the day. And they'll actually, when they outgrow their yurt, they eat it and make another one. So this plant here isn't a small caterpillar that then moved into a bigger space. It's actually two caterpillars with separate little homes. Two caterpillars under each of those. Makes a cocoon. Told you, never say always, or never. All right, another skipper that's fairly easy to identify, one of our grass skippers, is the peck skipper. And I chose it because its wing looks like a checkers board. See the little speckled checkered pattern there? You can find these outside. This butterfly should be everywhere. They are a grass-feeding skipper. We got a lot of grass in the state, right? They're not. Here's the caterpillar feeding on grass. So we're actually doing work at Ryman right now, developing ways to develop for skippers, ways to better rear them in captivity so that if we need it for a captive release, we can release them into the wild to bring their numbers up. The method that we developed is currently been modified and tweaked, but is being used for the Pauschik and Dakota skippers, which are new federally listed species of butterflies now. They were both federally listed about, I think it was 3 years ago. The Pauschik skipperling, named after Pauschik County here in Iowa, is not found in Iowa anymore. And the Minnesota Zoo is rearing them to hopefully reintroduce them in the wild. The Dakota skipper is the same thing. One of our big swallowtails. This is a tiger swallowtail. I chose it because it was yellow and black just for all of you. But it has another form too. So males are always like this. Females are often like this. But females can also be like this. This is the black form of the female tiger swallowtail. So it comes in two different patterns. And then something small and hard. So this is the eastern tail blue and the spring azure. Both of these butterflies, when their wings are open, are like a tiny little metallic blue butterfly. When they close their wing, they're both kind of gray, off-white with black spots. They're both the same size. They both can be flying at the same time of year. There is one good way to tell the two apart. Do you see it? Right here. Those two kind of orangish yellow spots let you know that it's an eastern tail blue and not a spring or summer azure. Because there's also spring and summer azure, which look the same. One just flies in spring and one flies in summer. They may be the same species. We're not 100% sure.
Are we ever, though, 100%?
No, we're not. And with insects, we definitely aren't. And then one more butterfly, I believe. I think this is my last one, the mourning cloak. We talked about the regal fritillary, how they survived as tiny caterpillars buried in the snow. The mourning cloak actually survives as an adult butterfly here in Iowa. If we have a bright sunny day, the mourning cloaks will come out and fly around for a little bit and then tuck themselves back away. So as it starts getting cold, they build like an antifreeze type compound in their body, which allows them to survive through our cold winters as adults. So they are oftentimes one of the very first butterflies you will see in the spring. Only potentially maybe beaten by the question mark or comma, who also overwinter as adult butterflies. So not all butterflies go down to Mexico where it's warm and sunny Not naming any names here. Some of us hang around like the rest of us do the winters. So there's a lot of things you can do for monarchs. Planting a butterfly garden, a pollinator garden is great. There are lots of groups that will help you. The Blank Park Zoo has a program right now called the Plant Grow Fly, where they have some resources. They have some resources you can get on their website, basically. But you can also put your garden on their website and get a little dot on a map, which is great. And if you want, they'll send you a sign that you can put in your garden that says you have a Plant Grow Fly garden. That sort of sign thing has become very popular. You have more signs than you have plants in your garden, I think. Every organization has come up with their own pollinators, certified, butterfly garden, whatever. And unfortunately, none of them protect your gardens from city ordinances and the like. And really, unfortunately, a lot of, if you were to take your turf grass lawn, which does nothing for nobody, except maybe Japanese beetles, and you were to convert it all into a prairie, the city would come and tell you, you can't do that. Because almost every city in Iowa has an ordinance, a lawn ordinance, that your grass can't be so tall, it can't be this or that. And a lot of people have tried to convert their yards and have run into that. And they put one of these signs in their yard and said, but it's habitat. These signs don't get you out of that. It's too bad that there's not a way that you can convert your yard, because turf is not habitat. Turf might as well be an ocean. So some things you can do. These are some general garden tips. I don't have time to do my whole butterfly gardening talk, and I'm already running long because I knew I would. But some guidelines. Whenever possible, use natives. Natives don't always work in an urban setting because they're wild and crazy. But when you can, use natives. It's great. For butterflies, single clusters of the same plant, because they have to learn how to feed. For the other pollinators, several different colors, because they're all attract different colors, and I'm going to show you those in a minute. Different size flowers. Small butterflies tend to go to small flowers. Big butterflies can feed from bigger flowers. Different shapes, and we'll talk about that in a second. All season flowers. Anytime that there is not snow on the ground, there are insects out moving around. And even when there's snow on the ground, they're moving around. But those that need to feed from nectar, there are early spring ones, they need spring flowers. There are late fall ones, they need the late fall flowers. So plant for all seasons. Host plants, coming up in a second, and different heights. Because when you're a tiny little beetle and you need to feed from a flower, if you have to crawl to the top of a sunflower, forget about it, that's too much. So short flowers for things on the ground, tall flowers for things that fly around. I was doing a talk one time, and I was talking about host plants, and I had someone raise their hand at the end of my program, and they go, when I was gardening on my parsley, I had this worm. And this worm was yellow, black, and green. And I go, what did you do with those yellow, black, and so if you didn't know, this is the advertisement thing for my program today, and I laughed when I saw this was the picture that was used. It's not a monarch caterpillar. And I go, what did you do with those yellow, black, and green worms that you had on your parsley and your dill? And she goes, well, I squished them, of course, because that was my parsley and dill. And I just stood there and smiled like I usually do. And I go, do you like the black swallowtail? Oh, I love the black swallowtail. They're such beautiful butterflies. I have so many flying around my yard. I bet you do. She was squishing the caterpillar of the black swallowtail. When I told her she was doing that, she turned like 4 shades of white. She will probably never squish another insect in her garden again. Ever. So if you want to have monarchs, there has to be milkweed somewhere. Somewhere. Your yard, in the fields, in the roadside ditches, in the wooded areas, in the prairies. If you want black swallowtails, there has to be parsley, dill, fennel somewhere they can eat. And if we don't share with them, they can't eat. If you want red admirals, painted ladies, there's got to be stinging nettles somewhere. Maybe not in your garden. But if you have a timber or something and you cut all that out, what are they going to eat? Butterflies need host plants for their caterpillars, or we won't have butterflies. These guys get more attention than these guys. Honeybees. And as far as pollinators go, they get all the attention. If someone says bee and they're talking honey, and they're talking pollination of any kind, they're talking the honeybee, and only the honeybee. And here's why. Those are the plants that they agriculturally pollinate. That's a lot. They're used a lot. So this non-native insect to the United States, which is now naturalized, and trust me, we love it and we'll keep it, does a lot of work for us. Here's another bee, the bumblebee. It's native, great insect. It's actually like the kitty cat of the bee world. If you know what you're doing, you can actually pet them while they're nectaring, and they're very soft and fluffy. They are. They also do agricultural pollination. Here's the plants they do. Not quite as many as honeybee, but they do agricultural pollination. And these red ones here, including tomatoes, which tomatoes don't need to be pollinated by an insect. Fine, I'll go there. But your tomatoes will do better if they are pollinated by bumblebees. The red ones are not pollinated by honeybees, but are pollinated by bumblebees. There are also leaf cutters, mason bees, and other ground-dwelling bees that are used for agricultural pollination. What about butterflies? What kind of crops do we think they pollinate? Oh, nobody. So they don't get the press of being pollinators like honeybees do, and in a lesser level, bumblebees do, and some of the other bees, because they don't do agricultural crops. They still pollinate, just not things we eat, so they don't get the pollination credit. Same with beetles. Not used for agricultural pollination, but they do a lot of pollination. They're not good at it, though. They're really bad at it. And they eat more pollen than they spread. But they're pollinators.
What is it?
What is what?
The last insect. There.
Blister beetle? You don't want to touch it, because it'll give you blisters. What? This one? Gulf fritillaria. No, it's a butterfly. Gulf fritillaria. Yep. Not really an Iowa native, really. More of a southern butterfly. I'm sure that was taken in my exhibit. Flies. Flies are actually really good pollinators. You know why? Because there's a lot of them. That's really why. There's just so many of them that they actually do a lot of good pollination. Not agricultural pollination, but a lot of plant pollination. You can actually tailor what insects come to your garden based on the plants you choose for your gardens. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. If you want, you can actually go, it's the Forest Service has a pollinator guide, and that's what this is pulled from. So bees, and by bees I don't just mean honeybees, I mean all the bees, tend to like pleasant smelling things, bright colors. Moths like things that smell a lot during the night. The moths that feed, not all moths feed. They like things that have an odor at night because a lot of them are late evening to night flyers. Butterflies like a lot of that color. Bright colors, they need to feed into things, so they want like usually like flute-shaped flowers, do really well for them.
What kind is that one?
What kind of butterfly? Yeah. That is a hair streak.
Everyone's asking what was that orange, black, and white mom?
That is a, I don't know off the top of my head. That's what that is. I will give you a website that you can go to and figure it out at the end of the program. I just don't know off the top of my head. I'm sure I knew when I put it up there. Beetles tend to like big dinner plate flowers because they like to roll around in it. So you know when your dog's rolling around in the grass in the yard? That's what beetles do to flowers. They get pollen all over them. Flies, they're my favorite. They like putrid flowers. So put stinky plants out for them. They don't care much about color. So at Ryman, as I mentioned, we're actually doing work on rearing butterflies. It's one of the programs we're doing for conservation purposes, so something we do. That's my butterfly wing. If you didn't notice, it looks like a butterfly. There's the body, there's the antennas, there's the wings. We actually worked with a bunch of students. We developed an app for tracking butterflies called the Unified Butterfly Recorder. It can be found on Android and on iOS. So that's what our surveyors can use. If they don't use paper, they can track it on a mobile device, which is great. Each year in March, we hold a program called Day of Insects, where we bring in 15 speakers to talk about insects. It's a great program and lots of fun. And if you all like insects, consider coming this year. It'll be the 30th in 2019. It's a good time. So how can you get involved? Monarch Joint Ventures. If you want to do something with monarchs, go to their website. Monarch Joint Ventures, they've got caterpillar programs, egg programs, milkweed programs, adult monarch programs. But all their stuff is only monarchs. Only. If you want to do something easy, I already talked about Journeys North. Great website, easy to get on. You go on the website, I saw monarchs in the spring. Done. I saw monarchs leaving in the fall. Done. You participated. If you want to post more of your stuff, Pomona will take any butterfly record that you have. Anything you see in your backyard, they'll take. E-butterfly's next. If you want to work on just Red Admiral's painted ladies, American ladies, then the Vanessa Project, which is an Iowa State-run program, is tracking their migration and is another good one that's easy to get involved with. Pomona will take your sightings. I already said Pomona. And eButterfly will also take any butterfly you see. You can go to either one of those sites and put it down, and they'll save that record. So if you see a butterfly, want to know what it is, you can also go there, and they have resources to help with that. But I've got a better site for that in a minute. If you don't want to work on butterflies but want to do other insects, there is Bumblebee Watch. And there's a lot of work right now with the rusty patch bumblebee, which is a federally listed species, which has actually been found right here in your backyards, which is great that it's doing well, or at least in this area. Ladybugs. There's a lost ladybug project where they're looking for different species of ladybugs. I was so excited when I found my first twice-stabbed ladybug when I was in college. And you're like, twice-stabbed? Yes, it's an all-black ladybug with 2 red dots. Twice-stabbed. I've only ever seen 2 in my life. Once when I was at Iowa State as a student. Dragonflies. There is dragonfly survey programs. Other resources that are available. You can go to the Ryman Gardens website. To get to my stuff, though, you got to go Ryman Gardens, collections, then insects. I don't know why I'm buried so far down. Well, I do know why, because that's where they put me. But on there, you can find my garden plant recommendations for pollinators. I have good nectar sources, good host plants. I actually, for all 120 species of butterflies found in the state, I have their host plants listed. Also insect information for Day of Insects and for our app, and other fun, just educational things are on there as well. A great resource if you want to learn an insect of any kind is Bug Guide. Bug Guide is a wonderful website. You can post a picture on here and say, I don't know what this is, and possibly the leading expert out of Germany will get on and go, wow, you found that there? And they'll tell you what it is. It's really cool, and there's been some fun stories that have come out of it already. And another wonderful site, although if you look at the pictures, it may not seem like it, is Insects of Iowa. This is a hobbyist-run site. Jim Durbin is the hobbyister. He used to work for Cedar Rapids' big aerospace company. Thank you, Rockwell Collins. Rockwell Collins. He was an engineer, and now he runs a site. He has lots of hobbies. That's why there are so many different animals here. But it really does have a lot of great insect stuff on there. And you can actually submit to him any insect you find. He'll take that record. If you say, I found this, you took a picture of it, you send it to him, he will add it to the database for any insect. It's a wonderful site. And then coming in the future, we are working on right now at Ryman Gardens a mobile app that people can use on their phones to help them identify butterflies. It was too easy to do 120, so we were like, hey, let's just do all of US and Canada.
Why not?
Why not? And so we are. All the butterflies are US and Canada. It's taking a little longer than we thought. Who'd have thought? I mean, there's only 850 plus species of butterflies in one, so why not? So another fun thing that we've got coming down the pipe. And with that, I will finally take questions. And so there is a microphone, because this is being recorded for everyone, that you can go over there and ask the questions. If that's too far to go, ask me the question and I will just repeat the question. But if you want your voice to be on the TV show, go over there and ask your question. Yes, question.
What are their chrysalids made of?
What are their chrysalids made of? So it's basically the same material as the rest of their bodies. So the chrysalid is not spun around the caterpillar. The chrysalis is formed during the last larval molt of the caterpillar. And it's so much crazier than that because the butterfly is actually developing in the caterpillar. So much so that if I was in my lab and I was very careful, I could cut into this butterfly, this caterpillar. I could find its wings. I could snip its wing off, sew it back up. By that I mean just glue it shut with probably fingernail polish. It would form its chrysalis, but it would be missing the wing, so there would be a window into the chrysalis. So the chrysalis is actually formed during the last larval molt of the caterpillar. So it's all the same thing. Yes?
When the butterfly is going to be the last generation that actually...
The migration, yep. Mm-hmm.
Is that determined after the butterfly is formed? It feels...
When does it know? So the question is, when does it get its cues that it's going to be the one going down? Because as I said earlier, we could have 2 to 3 generations. So the caterpillar is picking up on cues early on, even as a caterpillar knowing. Day length, temperatures, lots of things play into that. Because what has to happen then for that individual is it has to store up extra fat bodies to be able to make that migration, to be able to survive that winter sitting around, really not eating, because they're not eating down there, they're just sitting for the most part, maybe a little water now and then they'll fly north. So they're taking the cues very early on, even into the caterpillar stage, even from the plant. So the plant, as it starts not producing as much nutrients, it's believed that that's also a cue to them as well. Yes?
So I wondered about the 2-week lifespan.
Mm-hmm.
Is it like a very fast aging process, or is it like they're fine and then boom?
Well,
I mean, what makes them?
no, they're just using their resources very different. So the question is why do the 2-week ones live so much shorter than the migratory ones? How do they?
Is it like aging? It's like senescence, or is it like how? I've never seen them. Like you'd think if they were dying, you would see them.
Well, they do, and you can if you're looking. So what happens when they die is part of that. So let me take it as 2 pieces. One is why does one live longer than the other? Which the part for the why does one live longer than the other is one, again, it stores up those fat bodies. It knows it needs to go longer. It's treating itself differently, so it does live longer. The ones during the summer, they're flying, they're mating, they're active, they're laying eggs. The act of laying eggs takes a lot of energy. And when a female lays the bulk of her eggs, she tends to die. Now, why don't we see dead butterflies just everywhere? Because all the other animals out there are eating them. Well, they don't taste good to some things, but other things, yeah. Something like an ant will take them apart, no problem, and use the resources. Yes, question over there by the mic.
Shall I try it?
Sure, try it. Let's see what it does.
Okay, I see a lot of, around in the neighborhoods, I see a lot of people who pay to have poisons and fertilizer and so on put on their lawn. But other people are making a huge effort to just let the weeds grow, and you see 1 milkweed there, and 2 over there, and 5 over there, and a couple around the post. Do those little sprinklings work? Is it helpful? Or do we need a big patch 10 feet wide and 50 feet long? Or what's realistic? I mean, I don't have almost no sun in my yard.
Yep. So I'm going to take that as 2 questions. The first one I'm going to take is the plants and the weedy yards. Currently, one of the best plants for early spring butterflies, which also looks really cool under black light at night. So if you get yourself a black light, you go out at night and you look at this plant, it looks really cool. That plant is the dandelion. See, you like how I played that one up? Yeah, you're like, what is he talking about? Yeah, something that they're actually going at, they're targeting specifically. Dandelions are actually good early season. Now, it's not a native, it's a weed, it's an honest weed, but it's an honest weed that's doing a job. So one, again, turf does nothing for nobody. It's not habitat, not real habitat anyways. How much do you need? That's really debated. Some people say that too small of a thing is a sink. Things go there, they don't have enough resources, they then die. But if there's nothing there, then there's nothing anything could lay anything on. And if one egg is laid on one plant, there's a good chance there's enough resources that it will survive to adult. If 5 eggs are laid on that one plant, there's a good chance they won't make it because they will eat too much of the plant and all 5 will die. That's where the sink part comes in. So it's best, again, if you're doing a garden, to plant clusters of plants together. Host plants together, nectar plants together, so there's more resources. So even if you've got a small space, if you have a pot and you could put 5 milkweeds in it, that's better than 1 milkweed. Every little bit can help, and if you and 3 of your neighbors are doing something, that becomes a bigger thing. And it's almost disappointing for people, and I talk about this a lot in my big pollinator garden talks I do, that you might build the biggest, best pollinator garden you can in your backyard. But because all your neighbors, or the bulk of them, I don't want to throw them all in there, but a bulk of them don't have any resources, you're this tiny little island in this great big sea of no habitat. And so for a pollinator or an insect or a butterfly to find your garden, it may take a long time. And you may go years where you don't see much. And then some years you might see a lot because an individual just happened to find it, lay a bunch of eggs, and then boom, you've got all these beautiful butterflies. The best thing you can do is encourage more and more of your neighbors to have more and more resources for them. Host plants, nectar plants, and the like, because it's better for everyone then. It's better for the insects, and then we get to see them flying around.
Is there any sense in trying it if you have 3 or 4 hours of sun in a spot, or is it not worth it?
Every little effort can help. And there is a milkweed, and I don't remember which one it is off the top of my head. There is a milkweed that is very shade-loving. So if you want to do something that was shade-loving, the other thing you do is just don't worry about host plants. Worry about just putting some nectar out. So some flowering plants that they can feed on. And so the question had to do with if you don't have any real sun, should I do something? And yes, there are shade flowering plants that you can also put out. Yes, question.
I have a question. How do you, if you wanted to start milkweed growing in like a ditch or something in front of your house or something like that, how would you go about harvesting seeds or getting seeds or
So it's funny. One of the biggest problems currently for doing more milkweed for monarchs is access to seed and plants. And you can't just go currently to a lot of garden centers or your big box stores that have their garden thing set up and walk in and go, I want to buy milkweed, because they're like, we don't carry weeds. More and more are, and some of your specialty greenhouses are carrying more and more of it. Right now is actually a great time to do your own collecting of seeds.
I've seen plenty of plants out
Yep,
there.
yep, and you can find plants. You have to be careful because you can't take them from all sites. Some sites don't allow you to collect seeds, but an easy trick you can do if you can find some that are just in a roadside ditch somewhere, because that won't be protected, is you go out with rubber bands. And you put a rubber band around the pod. And as that pod continues to develop and the seeds develop, it won't then open up and disperse the seeds. And then you can just come along later, pick the pods off, open them up, and collect all the seeds. Otherwise, monarch or the milkweed plants, their seeds all kind of fluff away. You can buy seeds. There's lots of places now that are selling seeds, and you can get seeds online from a lot of sources as well. So it's becoming more and more available. Planting it, though, I recommend you don't just go out and go seeds, live, and throw them out. because all of the fall and winter critters are going to eat them all. If you want to do seed, you really need to then go out and really get it into the ground. Kind of dig it down in a little bit, kind of rake it underneath so that it's in the soil, and you'll have much better luck. What's even better than that can be plugs. So if you want to start some inside, they need a cold treatment. You have to put them in your freezer for a bit. But after about 3 months, you can do it in a month and a half even. In a freezer, you can pull them out, plant them in a pot or in a small plug tray, grow them up a little bit, and then plant them in the spring. And you'll probably have better success with those sorts of plants. Yes, question?
I have a question about poisoning. I've lost multiple different stages
Of caterpillars?
with poisoning.
Okay.
I know this happens a lot, but I'm trying to figure out, the food source. So I have a lot of random milkweeds that came up in places probably from seeds. So what I'm wondering is if we had done like a weed and feed real early, but haven't done anything else to the yard, and then they've come up, is that systemic?
Well, so I don't know what product. Okay, so the question, because I have to do this for the thing, because the TV can't hear the. So the question was about poisoning, and her monarch caterpillars are dying on her, and what could cause that, and is it potential that it has to do with a weed and feed treatment? Not knowing what you applied, I don't know that it was using a systemic in it. Now, could it have a systemic in it? Yes, there are lots of systemics that are used for plants. Well, and then it would get pulled into the plant. I mean, it's the whole point of that. Now, I also don't know that they are dying because of an insecticide sort of treatment, or if they're being hit with some sort of disease, because disease can be very common too in them, and you get a different kind of. You can get that. They can turn black. Lots of things can happen, actually. And so without seeing your situation, it's really hard to say which is happening. I mean, you could try cutting milkweed from another location that you know isn't treated and see if that fixes your problem. Right. If you continue to have problems, then there's a chance you've got a disease in whatever containers you're using, and you're just kind of moving it around. And then a good bleach cleaning is really one of the best ways. Or if they're just like leftover cheesy puff containers or something that you're raising them in, throw that one away and get a new one. I don't know what you're raising them in. Well, everyone. So the little tents, they need to be cleaned. So if you're not cleaning them, there's a chance that you could have OE that you're moving from generation to generation. There's a chance that you've got some other disease in the tent, and it's a disease and not that.
Do you bleach your leaves?
Yes. Well, depending on where I get leaves from and the importance of the caterpillar to me, I may or may not bleach leaves. Bleaching leaves is a good practice. It can clean them. I think sometimes it causes more problems because I don't have the time to wait for them to dry sometimes. If I had more time, I might do it more. It's a good practice.
Do you bleach the eggs?
I typically do not bleach eggs unless I have a problem with them. So the question was about bleaching eggs. Yes, you can do that. You can bleach eggs. You can do other ways of cleaning eggs as well. I don't like to do it unless I have to. And so I don't just do it just because. Yes, in the back.
So this year, we have some, my mom has, she has a little garden space, I don't, but she had a lot of anise hyssop that was growing last year, and it was a big, huge draw for the swallowtails.
Mm-hmm.
This year, for some reason, her anise hyssop didn't do as well. I don't know if it's because of the extended winter this year, or just what happened.
So your plant didn't do well, or you didn't get butterflies?
The plant didn't do well.
So that can be a variety of factors. It could be how it overwintered. It could be that it was too wet. It could be, so plant health can be a lot of things. Yeah. So without seeing more, it's hard for me to speak to why it did better last year than this year. But yes.
I know the swallowtails loved the anise hyssop and the bees and everything. They love that.
Yeah, but in some years we'll go here first and then we'll go here.
I had aphids on my milkweed.
Aphids on your milkweed, yes. Yellow ones too, right?
Well, they were red too.
Oh, you had the red ones? Yeah, the darker colored ones. Yep, yep. 2 different species.
And they were destroying the milkweed. So
Aphids need to eat something too, though, right? Aphids need to eat something too, right? So yeah, aphids, there's actually a lot of other insects that will eat milkweed. They just will. And I've actually watched monarch caterpillars eat through the aphids. Like they will just eat the aphids while they're eating the plant. It happens. Yes, if your population builds up so high that they're affecting the plant, that causes a problem, but you can't treat the plant for the aphids. The best thing, if you're really doing it for monarchs and you're knocking everyone else out, because again, the best thing to do would be plant more milkweed. Have more milkweed so that the monarchs get some, the aphids get some. But a neat trick you can do with aphids is their primary defense when they think something's going to get them and eat them is to drop. So if you just take your milkweed plant and you put a container underneath it, any kind, could be a big white paper towel, rag, whatever, and you turn it on its side a little bit and you tap it, the bulk of aphids will just drop. And then you can take them away, shake them out somewhere else, and there'll still be some on the plant, and they'll build their numbers back up again because aphids reproduce asexually. They go really fast and build their numbers up. But you can get rid of them that way without having to use something on them. And that would be my recommendation is do not put anything on it to go the other way. Yes?
Creeping Charlie, is that
Creeping Charlie.
a weed that's good for any insects that like worth keeping it around?
So while I will defend almost any plant, I am having a really hard time off the top of my head thinking of somebody that eats Creeping Charlie. No. But to attack Creeping Charlie, unless you're hand pulling it, can be really rough to not chemically treat and then affect other things around it. Yeah, I cannot think of someone. I'm sure someone does. I can't say that no one does because I know somebody will. I can't think of anybody off the top of my head that eats Creeping Charlie. I mean, there's no butterflies that I know of that do, but I'm sure there is an insect that does, but not fast enough, right? Or we'd have a lot more of them. But I can't think of any off the top of my head. I'd have to do some more look. But yeah, that is one that is a ground cover that does spread fast and cause problems. But it only causes problems if you're trying to have a turf grass lawn. If your lawn was a more native tall grass prairie sort of thing, it wouldn't do well. Those native plants would they'd choke it right out. So it's us trying to have those very 1950s television lawns.
So what percentage of the butterfly larvae in the wild actually end up being butterflies that live? And of those that don't make it, what percent are terminated by the technique fly?
Ooh, so parasitoids. So the question is how many make it to adults? And then of that, how many are parasitized? And that was my alien story where I told you about where they lay the eggs. And so it's a very small percentage, and it fluctuates depending on species. But it could be as low as 2 to 5% make it from egg to adult. And a wise entomologist who will actually be here tomorrow for Monarch Fest once told me one time, if much higher percentage survived to adulthood, we would be swimming in butterflies. It'd be great if more did survive, especially for conservation purposes. Now, how many are hit by parasitoids? I do not have a good number for you. I will tell you, though, that if you get a tachinid fly or one of the many different species of parasitic wasp into a cage, that they will knock every one of them out. So then it becomes a population density issue. The more dense the population of individuals are, the better their numbers are, the better chance they have to knock that population right back down. And that's what happens in nature. I mean, when you get a lot of rabbits, you get a lot of fox or coyotes, maybe, that eat the rabbits. When the rabbits go away, then the fox and coyotes go away. The same thing happens with the parasites.
How do you say that? Tachinid, not tachinid? Tachinid.
That's how I say it. So that's how I would say it. But we play this fun game as entomologists where we try to say scientific names, and different people say it differently in different places. I'm trying to think of a really good example right now. There's a really good one. We played this game, and I said it one way, and like the Canadians said it a completely different way, but I can't think of what the genus was right now. Not Graphium, not Hamadryas. I don't know. It's not coming to me right now. But scientific names are fun, and usually you do it wrong, unless you've had a lot of Latin. So, other questions? Yes,
So, Mark,
and I'll get you next. Go ahead.
Insect Day, what kind of topics are you going to have this year?
Ooh, good question. What kind of topics? So we have 15 different presenters. Each presenter gets 15 minutes to talk. We do not have the whole billing laid out yet. I do know that we are going to have a presentation from an insect farmer this year. She is raising insects in mass for human consumption. So that is one of them. Off the top of my head, I can't think of what other topics we have. Currently, we only have like 4 people that have yesed us, and we're sending out it's feeler time right now. So that's the only one that I know of off the top of my head right now, is that one. But there'll be 15 completely different talks.
Is there like an age requirement, like can a child attend that?
Anyone can come that can sit for a whole day of talks about insects. And our youngest attendee to date was 6. Now, most of them are adults. But we have had kids that come, and our youngest attendee who attended the whole day was 6. Well, then you can come. If you can sit still for a whole day of talks. What was your question? Did you have a question? Did you raise your hand?
How to make the population of monarch butterflies more bigger?
How do we make the population of monarch butterflies bigger? That is a great question, and a lot of people are doing a lot of work for that. But kind of the leading thing that people are trying to do right now is just plant a lot more milkweed. But with that, they should really also plant a lot more flowers for the adults to feed on too. And so that's kind of the plan that's happening now. Other people are trying to raise them in captivity and put more out that way too. Some people don't like that as much.
Once I found two monarch caterpillars, and then I thought, well, maybe they could get eaten, so I brought them in the house and picked up the milkweed plant that they were sitting on.
Yep, and yes, and so by taking them in the house and putting them in a vial and giving them food, you're taking away the parasitoids, you're taking away the predator problems, and it does increase their chances of surviving to adulthood.
And then when they were monarchs, then I let one of them sit on, then I let them sit on my finger for a while, then I was waiting for them to pee. I was patiently waiting
For them to fly off? Yep, and when they first come out and spread their wings, they will sit for a while on you just hanging out, right? Because they're drying their wings before they make that first flight. Another question? Yes?
Do they still put numbers on them?
So there is the monarch tagging, which is done out of Kansas. And you can go on Monarch Watch and you can buy your tags. We just ordered ours. We got 100 tags coming to us. And we'll put our tags on some monarchs and ship them down to Mexico.
So it's not too late to order?
No, you can still order them. They actually haven't even sent them out yet. You can't even get them yet. They only send them. You already got yours? Oh, well, I haven't got mine yet. Maybe mine are still in the mail.
I didn't know they were only good for a year.
Yeah.
I over-ordered, so.
Oh, no, you did not this year.
Oh, I think so. I ordered 50.
No. I have one of my surveyors who's going out and surveying. She's surveying at Ada Hayden, which is in North Ames. She has been seeing, just on her surveys, just on a single walk around Ada Hayden, on average, 50 monarchs each trip. This year, monarchs are doing great. You should have no problem getting rid of 50 labels. Normally, I would say you would have a problem. This year, you should have no problem getting rid of 50 labels.
If you want tags, best order right.
Yeah, you need to get them ordered.
There is a memo out from Chip Taylor that they're only doing 400,000, and they have almost sold
All 400,000, yeah. They only make so many tables each year because they're only good for 1 year. So I hadn't seen that yet either. I didn't do the order, and I just know I haven't seen them yet in the office. So I'm glad you guys have yours. Yes?
For the trees where the butterflies group,
Yep.
you know, is there a certain kind of tree where they use, or it's wherever they're at and?
So yes, they tend to have preferences. I can't tell you what species of trees, but you will, when you find them, it will be a lot of the same species of tree typically. I want to say it's going to be some sort of conifer, but the one time I have seen them do it, it was not on a conifer. So I want to say it should be, but that's what, you know, it doesn't have to be, because the one time in Ames when I was invited to go to someone's house and there were hundreds of thousands in these trees, they were not a conifer. It was along a small stream at the edge of a little forested area, and they were everywhere, and it was amazing.
Why did they do that here? I thought they only did that in Mexico.
They also do it as part, so the question is why do they also gather together in Iowa? As part of their flight down, they gather and have communal roosting at night for protection in numbers. So they'll gather together in mass as the migration too. So each night they will kind of gather in different places as they're flying down. Yes?
So our latitude, we should wait till mid-September to tag?
So the question is, when should you tag if you've got some tags for Monarch Watch? Well, since you're worried about getting rid of all your tags, what would actually be really fun is if you tag some early, like now.
I have one that just today.
Yeah, so I would tag some early. If you don't think you're going to get rid of 50, I'd start tagging some now, but save them because you need to put some out later too. And I would actually break it into 3 groups. I would do some now. I would do some mid-September, and if we don't have an early freeze this year, and we get late into October and we don't get a frost, a hard frost, killing frost, they'll just keep coming, and you should tag some of those late ones too. Usually people use up their tags really early, and if we have a really nice warm fall like last year, the monarchs just kept coming through. And they don't tag those late ones then. So my recommendation, and you may end up with a couple extra tags at the end because you didn't find any monarchs because a killing freeze happened somewhere, would be to save some for late into early October even, to see if you can tag some then too, to increase your chances possibly of having one found. I mean, the chance of having one found is so slim anyways, but it would be fun to see which one, if one was found, it would be.
I've never tagged and I'm really nervous about it.
It's very easy. The monarchs are a lot tougher. Butterflies in general are tougher than people give credit for.
I tried it with the toothpick and it wouldn't let off with the toothpick. Not the best.
I do it all hands. I just peel it off with my hands. I stick it on with my hands. Extra tools tend to cause problems with all that.
So they are
Fine.
a little more resilient than you feel.
All butterflies are a little more resilient than you feel. Yes.
Watch out for that one that comes behind you.
Get you from behind, right? Yeah, that attack one. Yes. Maybe I'll take one more question if there's one more. Otherwise, we are bumping right up against 8 o'clock. So does anyone have one more question? 100 questions? Well,
I have one more.
okay, I'll take yours as our last one tonight.
Is there anything I can do to increase the, I seem to be losing a ton of them from hatching from the egg.
Yep.
So I've got the eggs, then they are just teeny,
Your first instar caterpillars, you have a lot of death there.
And then I'm putting it into my little container with the fresh, and so many of them just aren't.
So there's a variety of things that can happen there. Are you using common milkweed to feed them?
Yeah.
So remember when I talked about the sap load? It could be something along those lines. It could be your plant, the common milkweed plant is just too hard for them. You don't have enough tender leaves for the little ones to feed on, possibly. What I would recommend is try starting them on a different species. One that has a more tender, softer leaf. Swamp is great. If you've got swamp, that would be great. If your swamp is still doing okay right now. Our swamp at work doesn't look great right now. It looked really good early, and it's kind of petering out early.
It's not true that if they start on a swamp that they won't eat common.
So
Because I don't have as much.
butterfly species, whatever they start feeding on, tend to like to stay on it. But I would rather go with a swamp early start right now than the tougher common milkweed leaves and convince them they should feed on the common milkweed than to lose them because they can't start feeding on the common milkweed. So that's the way, if you have those two plants, that's how I would do it. And next year plant some other species. World is a really good one. Has really small leaves and is a very small plant. It doesn't get crazy big like common and is a really good one to start them on if you want another trick. All right, thank you all for coming out today.